Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. At YouTube, it's youtube.com/Annette Talks, and iHeartRadio. So this is both a podcast and a video. If you want to see what we look like, go to YouTube and find us there. And my name is Annette Bybee, and I am hosting this episode, and I'm super excited because we have Susan. Is your last name pronounced Dold?
Yep.
I forgot to ask you. And we met at a party a few weeks ago, and your husband was playing in the band there, which was a lot of fun because you're my age and he's pretty close. And so all the music was like my music. That was so much fun. But we got
a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the band was great. It was a lot of fun. But we got chatting, and we did the usual. What do you do? What do I do? And when you told me after you said, I thought I've got to have her on the podcast because you work for a nonprofit organization, Truckers Against Trafficking, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, Truckers Against Trafficking. We've been around about 10 years, and I've worked with the organization for about 5. Doing various things. With nonprofits, you kind of fill a bunch of roles. So do a lot for them. And over the past year and a half, actually almost 2 years, I've been helping with their Freedom Drivers Project, which is a mobile exhibit that we take around the nation in times not like now. But normally we're traveling all around to educate people on the realities of domestic sex trafficking.
All right. So the main focus of the nonprofit is to educate truckers. Right.
Yes. So our mission is to educate the trucking, bus, and energy industries on the realities of domestic sex trafficking so that they can combat it as part of their everyday jobs. We certainly started in trucking, hence the name Truckers Against Trafficking, but then just realized a natural extension is the bus industry, and then also the energy industry. They're driving a ton of trucks, but they're also set up, when you strike any kind of oil or natural gas, these energy companies set up what they call man camps. And so they just bring in a bunch of men, set up, places for them to stay. I don't know the name of that, but I want to say barracks because my son's in the Navy, but I don't think that's the right term. And so they set up, these places for them to stay. And then of course the traffickers understand, hey, look, we've got an influx of men, typically in a place that is super tiny, out in the middle of nowhere. And these traffickers just figure it out. And then they bring their victims and traffic them. So we've been working with the energy industry and then also casinos too.
Okay, awesome. I think most of us out there are like me. We kind of have a really vague idea of what sex trafficking means or human trafficking. Is your organization focused on both sex trafficking and human trafficking, or mostly on sex trafficking? And what do those terms mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do focus on domestic sex trafficking. That's our focus, because typically truckers are in places where trafficking is happening. We call it human trafficking, and let's define it. So let's get that on the table, right? So human trafficking is the exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of either commercial sex or labor trafficking, where a third party, a trafficker, is making a profit. So if you think of it, let's give some examples here, right? So when you think of sex trafficking, you could think of prostitution, street level prostitution, or any type of prostitution, brothels, which, is not necessarily something that we think of these days, but they do still exist. You can think of strip clubs, you can even massage parlors, right? I mean, we've heard that's been in the news. And so those are examples of sex trafficking. And then labor trafficking, that's been in the news too, but you could think of things, massage parlors also fall under that. Could be a restaurant, could be construction workers. Of course, the most common, what we would think of is, working in the fields in the agricultural industry, but it certainly happens in other places where we frequent, right? Restaurants. And so that's labor trafficking. we just focus mostly on domestic sex trafficking. Now, that definition of human trafficking applies to adults, right? So where that force, fraud, and coercion come in. And those can be anything, you know, force, you can think anything of from the one-off beatings to, oh my gosh, these trafficked victims are raped, they're gang raped, they are shot, they are stabbed, they are branded, they are deprived of food and water. So all kinds of force, right? Sometimes they're frauded. And so, you know, you've all heard probably of maybe someone applying to a job as a model, or these people that are trafficked for sure overseas, right? It's like just a better life. Something else, right? Maybe be a maid in a better country. But here in the United States, they still are frauded, right? Whether it's being, you know, have your pictures taken, being a model, even just being a waitress if you come from a small town to go to a bigger town, right? And so fraud exists in those instances. And then coercion, right? And that really is the biggest form that's going to happen these days. And so anybody can be coerced because these traffickers will come in, they will get to know you, they will get to know your family, your friends. They might even be part of your group. So some people are trafficked by family members, trafficked by friends, you know, their family friends. And so what happens is they get into that circle, and then they're probably raped. It's filmed. And then the trafficker says, you know what? I'm going to show your family. I'm going to show your friends. I'm going to show your pastor. If you don't do what I say. So they do. All other kinds of coercion, right? I'm going to kill your family. I'm going to kill your friends. I mean, that happens. It's just horrid. And so that's coercion. So that force, fraud, and coercion part applies to adults. Now, anytime a minor is involved in a commercial sex act, it is automatically a crime, thankfully. And so that federal definition only applies to adults. So anytime you see a potential minor that might be involved in a situation, it's automatically a crime, and that person needs someone to step in for them and to help them.
Right. Yeah,
and of course, sorry.
I say that's just that's such a bigger, broader definition that I was expecting. Although as you were describing it to me, I was thinking about all the TV shows that you see where this is happening, and and I guess I never thought about that as trafficking, because I think a lot of us think someone that's been imported from another country and smuggled in, right, or smuggled from one state to another state. But it doesn't have to be that at all. It's just someone who's either been tricked into it, or they're being forced into it, or they're being coerced. And that doesn't mean you could be in your same town and not ever leave. And
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've worked with a survivor that was trafficked by her dad out of their garage. Oh, I know. It's horrible to think about. I'm sorry, I have horrible stories.
No, you know what? They are horrible stories, and you hate to hear them. But on the other hand, we don't want to be a part of anyone being stuck in a situation like that. So we have got to look evil in the face if we're going to help prevent it and fight it. And so as much as I hate, because, you know, I'm an attorney and I did not go into criminal law because, you know, I did an internship for a DA, and I sat in a rape trial. I sat in on a murder trial, and I saw pictures, and I was like, I can't do that every day. And so I really admire people like you who hear the stories on a regular basis and still go back and keep going back and fighting this.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
You probably hear a lot and see a lot that
I do.
Never
I do. Yeah. And I'm thankful that I don't necessarily sit in it every minute of every day, because that would be hard for sure.
How do you handle that anyway when you've heard something horrific, or, you know, help someone?
Well, I do name it for what it is, right? It's horrible. And I just also know that we are fighting. We're fighting to make a difference. We're fighting to ensure that we discover and disrupt human trafficking, right? Our goal is to eradicate human trafficking for certain, for sure, domestic sex trafficking. We'd love to eradicate that. And the more people that are aware that this is happening, the more that it will be seen for what it is, and hopefully the less and less it will be happening, because everybody will know, right? They'll know the signs and be able to say, you know what, my cousin, my niece, my sister, my friend, look what's happening. I think they're going to be trafficked, right? I think they're going to be groomed, which is a whole nother set. You know, we're talking about sort of that coercion piece, but these Romeo pimps will actually come in as like a boyfriend and groom their victims, buy them nice things, you know, promise them a life of grandeur, and then they flip the switch after a bit, right? And say, oh, you just need to have sex this one time with someone else. I would do it for you, but, and then it just never ends, right? So yeah, and to know that process, to understand that these people do this, and to know that sign, and to be a little bit aware of that is great. And so just making sure that everybody's doing what they can, and that's my goal, is to educate as much as possible.
Yeah, I would like for everyone that's listening to walk away with something that they can use, so that when they're out and about, because I would never think that I could see something at a restaurant. Like, that would never even occur to me. A truck stop would not surprise me as much, because I had a former brother-in-law that was a trucker, and he told me some stories that I thought, oh, yuck, you know? And so that does not surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't spend a lot of time at truck stops, though, so you know, it's not something that I would encounter there. So first, tell me some of the maybe success stories that you've had, and truckers that have been able to spot things. And, you know, I would like to hear some success stories, and then let's hear about what we can do as just normal people out here that maybe aren't truckers or a law enforcement or energy sector, that just regular old folks can do.
Yeah, for sure, because we can do a lot. We've had some great success stories. So we've trained over 900,000 drivers, and truck stop or truck industry professionals to identify sex trafficking, which is great. We've had over 2,500 calls into the National Human Trafficking Hotline from truckers alone. So we work very closely with the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That's the number that going to want everyone to call, and it's going to be in the show notes. And that number is 888-3737-888. And we really simply ask our truckers, and I would ask everyone, that if you just slightly suspect there might be human trafficking, to go ahead and call that number. You do not have to be correct. It does not have to be a trafficking situation. The employees there at Polaris, because they run the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, they're trained. They will talk you through, ask you questions so that you can assess the situation. They can help you assess that. And then they'll determine the next step. So they can actually call police to come out if there's a situation that might be happening that needs some assistance right now. They can just simply take notes, because they do take notes, and then kind of decide if there's a hot spot or not, and then determine what to do. They've worked with police before to create stings. But all those aside, very general, we've had some very specific cases of truckers making calls to save lives. So Kevin Kimmel is a story we love to tell. He was sitting at a truck stop, and he saw an RV in the parking lot, and he didn't really take too much note of it. He was filling out his paperwork, but just kind of noted, oh, look, there's an RV. That's kind of odd. This is a truck stop, and we're in the truck parking lot. And so he's filling out his paperwork. He noticed a guy go to and from the trailer, and then finished his paperwork, saw a couple more people, and thought, I wonder what's going on. So he's watching the trailer, and he sees a face pop out of the back window, and then sees that face get pulled back, the curtains pulled aside, and he was like, something is going on. So he made a call to police, and the police came out. they were able to separate the young lady from her captors. And come to find out, she had actually been kidnapped, which I say all the time, kidnapping does not always happen, but in this instance it did. She had been kidnapped out of Iowa and had been held captive for 2 weeks in this RV. She had been branded. Literally, they had just taken instruments from their RV, heated it up on the stove, and burned her.
Oh, gosh.
She had escaped one time. They pulled her back in, stabbed her feet with nails that they just found laying around so she wouldn't run again. She was dehydrated. She was malnourished. She had been forced to perform sex acts on men made through ads on Craigslist. And just amazing. Literally, Kevin saved her life.
Wow. How old was she? Do you remember?
She was 19. Mm-hmm. And so she is now back home in Iowa. I mean, it's traumatic, and I'm sure she had to go through some therapy, but Kevin literally saved her life.
Yeah,
and so,
who knows what, I mean.
Right. I mean, the doctors who worked on her in the hospital literally said she would have died from malnourishment.
Oh.
I know.
And I'm guessing that's fairly common. These people that are trafficked, I'm sure are treated so poorly that at some point, a lot of them do die from the mistreatment.
Right. Oh, yes. So the average lifespan of someone who is trafficked is ridiculously low. I want to say like 5 or 7 years, right? So if you're trafficked, let's just assume you're 18. A lot of trafficking begins at an earlier age. You're not going to live past 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
I bet you there's some suicides in there because if I were trafficked, I would probably.
I know, right? You would think, and I don't know that we have any statistics on that, but these traffickers also use other means like getting them hooked on drugs. So that's another tactic that they use, right? So sometimes we think, oh, they're just druggies, right? Looking for a fix, trying to find money. And the reality is they probably got hooked from their pimp who is trafficking them, right? Their trafficker who is, supposedly their pimp. And he's hooked them on drugs. And he uses that as, I say he because generally it's he, but we know that women also are traffickers, but the majority are men. And so they'll get them hooked on these drugs. They use that as a reward.
And probably a way to keep them docile.
Yes, and that as well. And of course, I always think, man, if I was trafficked, right? If I was in that situation, I might actually do drugs.
Yeah,
willingly.
I had the same thought. I've never done any drugs. I've never wanted to do any drugs. But if I were being trafficked, it might be better to be drugged.
Yeah.
Not be aware of what's going on because it just sounds like a fate worse than death to me.
Yes, right. Because what we say is these women, and I generally use the term male for a trafficker. That's not always the case, and I generally use the word woman or lady or girl for someone who is trafficked, who's the victim, because that is a generalization that is true here, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't work the other way. There are men and boys who are trafficked as well.
Sure.
Make sure that that's the case too, get that out there. But the majority, for sure, in the United States, the majority of trafficked victims are women and girls.
Yeah, when I hear about women doing the trafficking, that really boils my blood even more because you're a woman. You should know. What? I mean.
Should absolutely know better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know.
It's a special kind of terrible.
Special kind of terrible. Mm-hmm.
So what are the truckers trained to look for? Because I saw that when we met and we exchanged cards and you gave me this little
wallet card.
Right, wallet card. And that was one of the things that struck me is that it said, because it's meant for truckers, right? And one of the red flags was an RV, a van or RV that seems out of place out by trucks, a vehicle dropping someone off at a truck and picking them up 15 to 20 minutes later. And so when you mentioned RV, I thought, yeah, so that would make sense because why would an RV be sticking around and why would people be coming and going?
Yes.
That was going on. You know what? I think I'm so naive that I think I thought most women engaged in prostitution were doing it of their own free will,
Mm.
or because they were hooked on drugs. I don't think it occurred to me that many of them were being trafficked.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that. For sure, before I got into this space, probably 10 years ago, I was one of those people that thought it is happening over there, right? Somewhere overseas, not here in the United States, until my eyes were opened. And it's definitely happening here. We don't have statistics for how many. We do have a guess that there's a couple 100,000 in the United States that are trafficked every year. We know worldwide there's about 40 million people trafficked, both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And we also put childhood forced marriage into that category as well. But that's a lot of people being trafficked, right? It's also organ trafficking, which we don't necessarily think about here very much, but it does happen. And so all kinds of different ways to be trafficked, for sure. I forget what we were talking about with the question.
I said,
signs to look for.
Yeah, well, what are the truckers looking for? I'm curious because I know the RV, that makes sense, but I'm picturing these guys driving trucks, because it's usually men, and they're driving along the road, and like, are they seeing anything on the road, or is it mostly at truck stops, or what are they looking for?
Yeah, so typically it's going to be where they are stopping. So whether it's a truck stop or a restaurant or a hotel. And we're, of course, using the truck industry as the good guys, just like, and I say this all the time, just like every industry or every group of people, right? There are good people and there are bad people. Mm-hmm. And we know that the majority of truckers are great people. Mm-hmm. They are family people. They love their country, they love their families, they love their kids, and they look out. They're constantly on the lookout for things anyway. And so why not use them to be kind of the eyes and ears, right, of law enforcement, because law enforcement can't be everywhere. And so typically it's places where they're stopping along the road where we're asking them to look out for trafficking. Not that truckers haven't seen something on the road, because we've heard stories of truckers actually calling police, and they're on the road saying, I see something in a car that looks funny, you should check this out. And so that's great too, mm-hmm. that we see that, but certainly the majority of it is where they're stopping. And so, that wallet card has some great indicators, but we say the two most obvious signs of sex trafficking are if there's a minor involved in a commercial sex act. Anytime, right? That's just a crime, and you need to call either 911 or local law enforcement, or even the National Human Trafficking Hotline, mm-hmm. right? 888-3737, 888. I'll just put that number out again.
That's tattooed in my brain now too. Anyone can remember 888-3737, 888. Right?
Yep.
That's easy.
So I say it like that because it's easy to remember.
It is.
And then the second most obvious sign is pimp control, right? And so you said, all right, on that wallet card, it says if a van or a car drops off a bunch of girls and women, right, that's a sign of pimp control. They don't have to stay, right? And so when you think of, going back to the definition of forced fraud or coercion, a lot of people think that these women are chained up, right? Forced to stay inside by these actual chains, and that's not the case. It really is these invisible chains of force, fraud, and coercion. And so the pimps, the traffickers, do not need to stay. They know they have these women and girls under control. They might have a cell phone with just the trafficker's number in there, mm-hmm. and so they have to call to report or call to say I'm done. And so anytime you would see something, and you might see that at a hotel that you're staying at, you might see that in your neighborhood, right? Because we know that there are brothels in neighborhoods. They're using houses. And so just being aware of who your neighbors are, what's going around, are great signs. Now, let's just say, you're not going to see any of that. What's another sign? You're sitting at a restaurant. Another sign potentially, could be interactions between, typically, again, an older male and a younger female. And, you know, we get gut reactions all the time on different situations that we see. And so if your gut is telling you something's off about this, maybe the person, the trafficking victim, the girl, the woman, young lady, maybe she doesn't seem at ease. Maybe she seems a bit malnourished. Maybe she's got bruises. Tattoos are a big thing with the traffickers. They will tattoo maybe dollar signs or daddy's girl or something, maybe even a barcode onto these victims. I know.
Is it usually on the neck?
It is. Typically, though, it can be anywhere. And so, and then really looking for someone also who maybe isn't comfortable, maybe they're not going to talk for themselves, because these traffickers have, of course, told the victims what they can and cannot say. So they're coached, and they will not say much in public. They will not create eye contact with someone. They will not necessarily speak for themselves. They typically will not have access to money of their own. Now, I know we're kind of a cashless society these days, so that's not necessarily abnormal.
But they're not going to whip out a credit card and start using it.
Right. So they wouldn't have a credit card. They also wouldn't have their IDs. So, you know, you're just on the outset, you're just kind of looking for maybe someone who's uncomfortable, who's not talking, who really seems submissive to the person they're with. You know, if you happen to interact with that person that you're looking at and see, you know, you don't ever want to say, "Are you being trafficked?" Because no, they're going to say no. They may not identify as a trafficking victim. They may not even understand what that is, right? And so you want to ask things like, when's the last time you saw your family? Hey, do you have access to your own ID, your own money? Do you feel safe? So those are some questions to ask, you know? And if they don't, well, then that's the time to call 911.
Okay.
And of course, probably, you know, the bathroom is probably the only place where that person can go by themselves. Right.
So and see that person, like if we follow that lady into the ladies' room, and that would be a good place to ask to kind of gently ask some questions. Because I'm thinking trying to keep it casual so they don't freak out, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and if they are, I could see calling 911 from that bathroom would be the best thing to do.
Yeah,
stay
for
there.
sure. Yeah. Anytime like time sensitive, you're in a situation that, you know, you've got to get someone out there now, you just call 911.
And if you're not in the bathroom and you see them across the restaurant or whatever, is it cool to like try to slyly take a picture with your phone?
Yes.
And because it would be really easy to pretend you're making a call.
Yep.
Take a few pictures, you know, of both the trafficker and the traffickee. Is that a word?
Well, we would say a trafficking victim. Yep.
Trafficking victim, yes. Yeah, it's not like this is their choice. But get pictures of both of them and
yes.
Call the 888-337-888.
Call the hotline.
And then tell them you've got pictures and where you're at and that kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And then if possible, get a picture of the car. Right. If you happen, you know, if during the course of things happening, they leave the restaurant, absolutely follow them out discreetly. You know, we say never approach them, right? You don't want to scare them off, mainly for the safety of the victim.
Right.
Because if you can get that information to the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, they can get it to the police, then the possibility of recovery is much, much higher. So you want to call that in, you want to get as much information as possible. If you can't get the license plate number, at least get, you know, the make and model of the car, and of course where you are. Ask the manager or somebody at the restaurant the address of where you are. Of course, we can always Google it, but you know, all those bits of information are super helpful in starting a case. Awesome.
Yeah, it sounds to me like the pictures and the license plate number really key.
Yeah, absolutely. So one time we had a truck driver who was a little concerned about what he saw, an interaction between a man and a young lady. And so he took note, he called police. They took he called the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. They took down the information, actually passed it on to police. Police ended up calling that truck driver back and asking him more details. And they ended up actually getting in contact with that, I think it was a truck driver, unfortunately, who was trafficking this person, but kind of getting that information and then following up and getting a recovery. So,
yay!
Always
so
good news.
Is there much success with that hotline? Do you hear a lot of stories of recovery like that?
Yes, there's a lot of success with the hotline. So the hotline is there for really anyone. You don't have to be a trucker to call. We partner with them and they give us statistics for us so that we can provide that to everyone in the trucking industry. But the National Human Trafficking Hotline is really for anyone to call if they suspect any kind of trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. You can go on their website and you can get statistics by state as to the calls that have been made, the different types of calls, right? What type of trafficking it is, because even within labor trafficking, they have a couple different designations or categories of trafficking. So there's lots of good information on that website.
And which website is that?
Yeah, so it'd be, if you just Google National Human Trafficking Hotline number or Polaris, they're the ones that run the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I think it might be polaris.com that you go to. But if you just Google that up, then you can find that information. But they have a lot of great statistics. I don't think they have our statistics on their website, but they provide that information for us, so we can provide that to everyone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So do truckers call that same number, the 888-3737?
They do. Mm-hmm.
And so everyone is encouraged to call that.
Everyone is encouraged to call, no matter what, right? Even if you're unsure, because really, if it's okay to be wrong, but imagine if you're not wrong and you don't make the call, then that person now is stuck in a life of slavery, right? We call this modern day slavery because that's what it is.
It is. And I think about that a lot when people talk about, the slavery that happened a couple of hundred years ago. I was thinking, why don't we focus on the slavery that's happening right now? Because we can actually do something about that. And it's so much, I don't want to say one's worse than the other, but being a sex slave, I just can't imagine anything worse in this lifetime,
No, right? No. And so, yeah, when we talk about it, it's like, sometimes we're like, oh, this person is forced to have sex X number of times a day. It could be 5, it could be 10, it could be 20. But the reality is just because money exchanges hands does not mean that it's consensual. And really it is rape.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So
these coerced or defrauded into doing this or forced, these are not people that signed up for this.
Absolutely not.
So that goes to the question, one of my, I posted on Facebook that we were going to be having this, recording this episode, and one of my friends asked the question whether legalizing sex work would help in this situation. And it sounds to me like it wouldn't, because these are people that are being forced into this.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we get asked that a lot. But unfortunately, legalizing prostitution is not the answer. So there was a study done by Harvard that compared countries who have legalized prostitution, because there are some like Germany, Norway, that have legalized prostitution. There's even some places here in the United States, in Nevada, some counties that have legalized prostitution. And what they found was that trafficking actually is increased in those areas. And that's unfortunate. It's because the demand is there. There's not enough people willing to do it. And so the traffickers just have big business then. We have a instance so I was telling you that I lead our Freedom Drivers Project. So it's a 48-foot renovated show trailer, kind of like a mini museum. We take it around the nation during times not like today, right?
Uh-huh.
But normally, and it just gets a little bit more in depth into some human trafficking stories, some sex trafficking stories. And one of the stories we have in there is a woman who was trafficked in a legal brothel in Nevada. And she had to wear a dog tag that said her bed number. So people purchased her by number, not even a name, a number. And her trafficker sold her for weeks at a time, sold her to this legal brothel. The brothel took 40% of her earnings and her trafficker took 60%. So she got nothing.
Wow.
Yeah,
So,
it's.
There sounds like there's a lot of different ways then that people are trafficked, and a lot of different ways that their product is sold. You see Craigslist was one way. Is a lot of this because I saw some of these stories about what were some of those big websites that they were being accused of being used to sell?
Backpage.com or Pornhub or
Wayfair? Or the one that
Wayfair. Yeah, that wasn't true.
That was hey,
wasn't true.
that just sounded so crazy to me. Like, how is that even possible? Like, but there's other stuff like that goes on where.
So up until a couple of years ago, Backpage.com was a huge place where you could sell a person, right, for sex.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, well, that was taken down, which was a little bit. It's great that it was taken down, but also on another level, it was actually somewhat good that it was up and running, because then we at least had faces that we could look for, right? So if law enforcement was looking for somebody who was missing or who was missing but potentially being trafficked, they could go on Backpage.com and look and see. Right. And that's actually had been a source for the law enforcement to find victims, to identify kind of if there were a couple different people selling people, right? So if one person had a couple different ads, then they knew that this person was trafficking more than one person. And I don't even know what they're using now, but there is something that has replaced Backpage.com.
So they're actually like faces and dollar amounts kind of
Well,
thing?
it's all the dark web, which I know nothing about.
Yeah.
And so, but it is still happening. Pornhub right now, though, is a huge place where trafficking is happening. So it's exploded because of COVID, right? Because everybody's now not going anywhere.
Right.
And so Pornhub is absolutely part of the problem. And they will not
know what that is. What is Pornhub?
Yeah, why would you?
Yeah.
So Pornhub is a website that you can go to. You can have you can log in. So you don't need any credentials to log in. You don't need to say who you are. You don't need to legitimize your existence, right? So you can create any sort of false identity on Pornhub. And then they don't check to see if anybody's of age. So anybody that's in the videos, so it's pornography, right. And they don't verify the age or consent of anyone on the videos. So they're absolutely complicit in sex trafficking.
So basically what you're saying is these people are being trafficked into making these videos.
Yes,
that are then being
exactly right. Yeah, boils my blood.
Yeah, it's all disgusting. It's all
yeah. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, Pornhub is just doing a horrible job. And we know that pornography is the precursor to buying sex. Also, pornography, right, desensitizes people to sex, to different sex acts. And so then they want more and more violence. And so by the time somebody goes from pornography, just pornography, to buying sex, they've been so desensitized to a normal sex act that they want violence. And of course, Pornhub and any pornography video or movie will depict women as liking torture, liking things rough. And so these men think that they can do that. And we also know with legalizing prostitution, it just makes it more unsafe for the the prostitute, which I'll say prostituted person. I don't like to say prostitute because I don't think anybody should do it of their own free will.
Right.
And so it's unsafe because these men want it. They think that they can do horrible things to women, right? They can strangle them, torture them, just make it. They think that women want rough sex because
right.
they're
so
desensitized.
Right, and I also hear that it's when you get to that point where you get so involved in this world through viewing pornography and taking action, eventually you want younger too, and that's why kiddie porn has become more popular. And I'm glad that you actually brought this up because so many people in the world think there's no problem with pornography, and it's huge. I mean, it's
a huge problem.
It's a real big problem,
mm-hmm.
and in my church we have a really big push. I mean, it's absolutely forbidden, but it's addressed in a big time in how to avoid it, how to address it once you've started looking at. I mean, it is never just it's okay because you're just looking at an adult or whatever. It's never okay. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that because it's a big connection between.
There's a huge connection.
And pornography.
Yeah. And we actually have a demand program through Truckers Against Trafficking. We've got a video on demand. So we've got a video that's on the subject of demand.
Okay. Right. It's not on demand, right?
It's not on demand. And so which just kind of addresses like our underlying reasons of why this exists. Why does pornography exist? Why does sex trafficking exist? Why does it happen? And we just know that culture, right? Culture in and of itself is not helpful. Right. And so women stereotypically in music videos, in film and TV are portrayed very negatively. Mm-hmm. And for sure, you've got all these names, right? Hoe, prostitute. Right. In the trucking world, it's lot lizard. Right? That's what they would call a woman who was being prostituted in a truck stop.
Right.
Lot was a lot lizard.
Yeah, and they don't have those names for men.
No,
that's always
not at all.
Me. It's like it takes two to tango. So why is it the women that are always denigrated and not the men? And when I hear about men who've looked at, because it's usually, but unfortunately the numbers are rising for women that look at pornography now as well and get hooked. But generally it's men that really get into it. And I always wonder, don't you realize that could be your sister? That could be your daughter. Those women are being...
they are someone's daughter. Right.
Yeah. And so how is it that you think that you could think that's okay? It's not good for the men either. But the women are especially at risk with this, all of this behavior. So
yeah, absolutely at risk. Yep.
It's all deep, dark, evil. And I really hope that people that are viewing pornography that are listening will realize that it's not a victimless crime. And it's not good for the people that are being trafficked into it or the people that are even doing it, at their own will. But it's certainly not good because, like you said, it leads to wanting to go out and use a prostitute and it's bad from there. It's bad all the way around.
Well, right. And so, I've also heard stories of women, right, who go into the adult entertainment business and they are forced to do things that they do not want to do. Wow. You just have to Google that. And, there's women that are suing the pornography industry because they will write in their contract, I will not do X, Y, Z. And it doesn't matter. They are forced to do it.
It's like, it just, what keeps coming to my mind is that these women become objects. That's all they become. They're
absolutely.
Objects. And so whatever their trafficker or the pornographer wants to do with them, it's okay. They're going to be used that way. And they become objects. They're not people. They're not seen as people anymore. They're a product. They're a way to make money.
That's right.
So it's bad.
Yeah, they are objectified and dehumanized.
Oh yeah.
And we can talk about, let's also, it just kind of reminded me of, there's a game called Grand Theft Auto. And I think it's number 5. Okay.
Are there that many?
Yeah, right.
Oh gosh.
And I'm pretty sure these are rated M, but I can guarantee you, talk to, if you've got boys, talk to your boys who are 13. They know people who have it. Or maybe as a parent, you think, oh, it can't be that bad. But here's what happens in Grand Theft Auto 5, okay? In one of the instances, there is a prostitute, right? You can have sex in this game with the prostitute, and then you can kill her.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how is that?
I know. How is that possible?
How is that not? Oh, that's just sick.
Yeah, so we're desensitizing our boys, right?
Well, and that's just, and that's even worse. And I mean, bad enough when you see that kind of thing in TV or movie, but when they're the ones that are actually controlling it and making it happen,
yeah, we're not only are we setting up women and girls to be trafficked, right? The media, they're horrible. They're setting up our boys to be traffickers and consumers.
Yeah.
From a very, very young age.
That's very sick. Yeah, because sometimes I'm glad that I have girls because they're not naturally attracted to pornography. Although they can run across it so easily. We've already had to have the discussion a few times. I have my 8-year-old run across it I don't let them have smartphones because they're just too darn young. But they go over to their dad's house, they have access to smart. Anyway, my 8-year-old ran into a naked lady picture, and her older sister saw it and teased her and wouldn't tell me what happened. Anyway, we had to have the whole discussion just because something she wasn't searching up just popped up on her. And you wouldn't think that's possible, but I can remember one time literally reading a church article. A pornographic image popped up on my phone. I have no idea where I have no interest. I've never done a search for it. And I was like, what, how do I get out of this? So kids can find this stuff even when they're not looking. It can pop up and you can never unsee what you've seen. And so especially for young boys, if they see that kind of thing, even if it's accidental, it already changed their brain a little bit, and the curiosity, comes on board, and they're going to go find it. And it's so easy to find these days. So easy. It's just, you have to be so on guard with what your kids can see. And so, even with girls, I have to be constantly monitoring what are they being exposed to, and let's talk about it. We have talks about, what people are allowed to do, what people aren't allowed to do, what you should be talking to people about all the time, because it's just too easy in this world for this kind of thing. And now we're going to have to talk about trafficking.
And especially now, right? Everybody's at home. Everybody's on their computers. Yep. They're doing whatever they're doing on their computers, even our kindergartners, right?
Yeah, I know. They're forced into online school right now.
Which is a whole nother story. Anyway. But we have to be super diligent about what's going on, what they have access to, right? These games nowadays, right? You can play games with anyone. A trafficker can say he's a 13-year-old girl playing a game.
Yeah, and because my girls they love Roblox, and so they'll tell me, "Oh, Mom, I made a new friend." And every time I'll say, "Honey, you have no idea who you're really talking to. That could be a 50-year-old man for all you know."
Absolutely.
So just remember that if any of these friends ever want to talk to you outside of the game, you shut that down and you come and tell me, because I'm sure that's one of the ways they get through is they start talking to them on some innocent
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. We've heard stories of that.
So we've got to be careful of that. We've got to be careful of what our kids are seeing on video games. That Grand Theft Auto would not ever make it into my front door. I can tell you that right now.
Right. And I always told, I've got 2 boys. They're older, but when they were younger, I was like, I'm sorry, you're not having an MA or mature game. I don't care. I do not care not having it. But you know what? They go to their friend's house who's 14. They've got these mature games. I think it's ridiculous.
So you have to have the discussion. You have to have the talk. And you have to really try hard to make sure that they're not being exposed to this stuff. And when they are, because they will be, you got to talk to them about it. Talk to them about what's appropriate.
Absolutely.
What's appropriate, what it all means, So,
Yep. And I would also encourage people to, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Let's not have this be a taboo topic, right? What are you talking to your kids about in regards to trafficking or, pornography or whatever, or even just sex, right? Like, what are you telling your kids? What are you talking to them about? What's your stance? How can we help each other, right? To create a community that is aware and looking out for each other. Because I feel like, in this day and age, we're not a community. Yeah. I happen to live in a great community and I consider us a village, but I think that is not the norm.
No, I know. I look around and I don't know 90% of my neighbors. So yeah, you're right. I need to get out there and talk with them some more.
Challenging you, Annette. I'm challenging you.
You are challenging me. But my girls don't go to any place unless I know the family. Because
right. You don't know.
You don't know.
I hate to just create this fear of everybody and everything, but honestly, I mean, you never know if your kids, friends, parents, what they're like.
Yeah. So I would say not fear, but caution.
Caution for sure.
Awareness and knowledge, information.
Yep.
So the more we know what to look for now. Because now I'm thinking every time I go to a restaurant, I'm gonna be like, checking it out, or if I am at a truck stop when I'm traveling, looking for those things. So just what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say I do want to put a plug in for truck stops because we do train with truck stops. So TA Petro, Loves, Flying Pilot J, they all do our training. And they're all aware and they're all out there looking for trafficking. And I will say at the truck stops in general, I always say forced prostitution. I don't like to just say prostitution. Forced prostitution is not really, truckers are not being solicited like they were in the past. So we are making strides in progress.
That's good, because that's kind of the impression that I had.
Right.
And it was really sad, kind of gross thought to think about, that's why truck stops not something that, really want to hang out. But I'm glad to know that you're making progress. And it sounds like your nonprofit is involved in some really awesome things. And so we're going to remind everyone that if you see something that looks kind of off, you see someone that looks like they're not in charge of themselves, like you said, undernourished, those tattoos, you said barcode, $, daddy's girl, things like that, where they look like they don't have their own access to their own money. If you talk to them and find out they don't have any ID, then we're going to have them call. If it's immediate, call 911. But if not, then it's 888-3737-888.
Yes.
And we're going to try and get surreptitious pictures of faces, license plate numbers, make models of cars, things like that. And,
absolutely.
So good. Awesome. This has been great. And if people want more information or do any more research on this, what do you suggest?
Yes, well, of course, our website, which is truckersagainsttrafficking.org. Okay. We have a plethora of information up there, but there is a tab for resources, and there's a tab, and under that resources tab, there's lots of various resources, including stuff for parents, right? So if parents want to go out there, and we've got some great ideas for you. You can also go to the National Human Trafficking Hotline or Polaris.com to see what's out there. And really, also, I would say look in your community and see what's there, what anti-trafficking organizations are there, what they could potentially help you with. I mean, I would encourage anyone who has like a Girl Scout troop or, everybody's kids are at school, but we really should be implementing some sort of education with our kids around the junior high level.
Oh, okay.
So, talk to your school administrators. We have, at least at the very minimum, right, we have Busing on the Lookout program, which is our busing program, and we do train school bus drivers.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, because, our school bus drivers are looking out for our kids.
Right.
And they see them day in and day out. They see who picks up the kids, who drops off the kids, what the kids are like. And so they're the first ones really that can probably notice a change. Right. Whether it's they're sad or they're all of a sudden carrying, a Louis Vuitton bag, right? Because they're being groomed. Or if somebody different is picking them up at the bus stop, who is that person? So yeah, that's kind of some of the resources there.
All right. And I'm sure that your nonprofit accepts donations, I'm guessing.
We do, of course. Yes. And, we need those donations because we really want to educate everybody, not just the trucking industry or the bus industry or the energy industry. We really want to educate everybody on the realities of domestic sex trafficking so that we can end this, right? We can discover and disrupt the trafficking rings and just have nobody be trafficked. That's, of course, our goal is to have trafficking be a thing of the past.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of attention in the news right now with a lot of busts that have been happening recently, and I'm very heartened to see that and to know that things that are when there's a lot of attention to it, people start paying more attention and start becoming more aware.
Yes.
So hopefully we're making a big dent. And
yes, I hope so too. I know we are.
Great. Well, we are hopefully going to continue making a difference. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this wonderful information and going out there every day and being willing to really get into this stuff. It's got to be hard. So I appreciate all that you're doing. And I will share the 888-3737-888.
There you go.
And the truckersagainsttrafficking.org link in the show notes.
Great.
And if anyone wants more information, they can go again to truckersagainsttrafficking.org. And anything else you want to say in parting?
I would just say that, human trafficking is one of the greatest human rights violations of our time. Lots of people want to make a difference with their life, do something, and they're not in a position to do so. But now that everybody that's listening to this podcast is armed with the right information, they can absolutely make a difference and save a life. And I'm excited about that.
Awesome. You're right. This is a huge issue, and I'm glad to even play a small part.
Yes, we're so thankful. I appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you again, Susan Dold from truckersagainsttrafficking.org. And again, 888-3737-888 if you see something, and make a donation if you can afford it. And thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.